44 years ago, the war against the two-headed demon dragons left countless mysteries. Was the demon dragon successfully conquered? Are heroes dead or alive? What exactly happened in that war? 44 years later, the curse of the demon dragon still lingers, but Li Longhui awakens in this world. A new crisis has quietly arrived, the enemy is restless in the darkness, and the game between gods and demons has restarted. Li Longhui. The water in this world is very deep. Let's observe first. Wait until you have the strength, otherwise go to another world to hide. Chapter 0. Preface. You are listening at novelfull.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 1. Thunderstorm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 2. Adherence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 44 years ago, the retreating army from the Dark Rain retreated to the Shenting Canyon Pass, 200 kilometers away from the Blue Wing Mountains forest, where they received support supplies from the Adventurer Guild and mobilization soldiers from the kingdom. The expedition army built a new military camp at the pass of Shenting Canyon and rested well. After regrouping, they returned to the edge of the forest in the Blue Wing Mountains. The black rain has stopped, and the group of ghouls is nowhere to be seen. The corpses left behind prove that the relatives of the cold bone evil god are also unable to resist the curse of the double-headed demon dragon. The punitive army is building a stronghold, continuing to search for the traces of 12 heroes and 400 warriors in the forest, while monitoring the movements of the cold bone evil god and being vigilant against the conspiracy of the evil god. The exploration work was very difficult, and the dwarf with the highest resistance wore the best fully enclosed protective equipment, applied heavy magic protection, but could not avoid casualties. Even though they wanted to desperately retrieve their hero, glorious Gimli, and artifact, 100 forged battle axes, in the face of endless casualties, the dwarves were the first to choose to withdraw. In the end, everyone reached a tacit agreement. The 12 heroes and 400 warriors died together with the two-headed magic dragons. In the same year, the punitive army disbanded. But various forces still left their forces to continue monitoring the forests of the Blue Wing Mountains, and this monastery was built as a holy stronghold under the orders of the great patriarch. And Adrian chose to stay in this sad place and continue to hold on to his inner hope. Now, Adrian watched as Teresa lifted the lid of the square instrument on her desk, revealing the control panel. With a few clicks on the buttons, a piece of paper with data printed on it spat out of the instrument. This instrument is a monitoring magic item developed 40 years ago by the alchemy team of the Mage Tower. It can digitally detect the curse of a two-headed magic dragon and display the strength of the curse. After 40 years of iterative updates, the device has now been equipped with functions such as detection, warning, record storage, and data printing. The latest model also has the ability to directly transmit data between two devices of the same model, but the Holy Church has not yet allocated funds for procurement. After 40 years of data recording, the chief mage of the Mage Tower pointed out through big data analysis that the curse power of the Blue Wing Mountain Forest is slowly weakening and will eventually disappear completely. At that time, one can enter the explosion center and search for the truth. As for which day it was, the chief mage stated that there was insufficient data and more data needed to be collected. Teresa pointed to the data typed out from the magic prop and spoke her opinion in a frenzy. Master Adrian, this monitoring magic item was brought back from the danger warning line near the curse power. The external part of the magic item is not damaged, and the self-check is normal. You can see from this data that the curse power started to decrease significantly about 3 days ago, which has never been this low in history. And along the way, I also checked several peripheral monitoring magic items, and they all decreased significantly, but not as much as the inner part. Finally, Teresa approached Adrian, who was staring at her closely, and came to the conclusion. The power of the curse is collapsing from the center. This is an opportunity, we should organize manpower to enter the explosion zone. Teresa looked at Adrian's smiling face, then glanced at him and said coldly, "Why smile? I'm talking about business." Adrian immediately straightened his face, looked at Teresa, who was like Teresa, and roused in his heart, alas, it's rare to see Teresa, who is as impatient and cute as she was when she was a child, suddenly changed back. That's right, Teresa is the daughter of Senior Teresa. After the death of the Teresa couple was confirmed, Teresa, who was 7 years old at the time, was adopted by the Anglican Church in the capital and received 5 years of papal education. At the age of 12, she became an apprentice pastor and applied to intern at this monastery. As Teresa's daughter, she had a better choice, but she persisted in coming here. When Adrian saw 12-year-old Teresa come here, his heart ignited a new goal of protecting Teresa well. Teresa has been with her for 39 years, growing from a cute girl to her own right arm, a respected grandmother. I am no longer the same hero as my mother who used to shout about herself. I want to become a pastor as powerful as my mother, and I want to go to the explosion zone to find my mother's little girl. Teresa is also in her early 50s now, blessed by the magic of the holy light. Although she may not always have a youthful face like a female high elf, she looks only in her 30s, with a more mature and intellectual charm. Adrian stopped daydreaming and cleared his throat, saying, "All right, when the rain stops, I'll go to Shenton Castle. First, I'll check with the people from the magic tower to see if there's any problem with monitoring the magic path. They understand this better, and then I'll talk to Baron Hawk. If the Mage Tower, Adventurer Guild, and Elves area detect the same data changes, they'll also go find Baron Hawk." Then Adrian shouted towards the door, "Daniel, come here." Seeing no response, he shouted twice again. With the sound of thumping footsteps, a young man pushed the door in. The person who came was Daniel. He had blonde hair and a handsome face, with an elegant and composed temperament. If it weren't for him wearing a white pastor's robe, he would have thought he was a noble young master from somewhere. Daniel glanced at Mother Teresa and avoided her gaze, asking, "What's up, teacher?" "Notify the knights of the Guardian Army to prepare their horses and equipment. After the rain stops, we will set off to visit Shenton Castle. Let's go." Adrian looked at the student whose hair and clothes were somewhat messy and said, "Daniel is a student enrolled by Adrian here, with a good talent for holy light magic and management skills. He gets along well with the people in the monastery." Adrian thought that once he had fulfilled his wish, he would recommend Daniel to manage the monastery. Daniel saw that teacher Adrian had no other instructions, so he left the office and lightly closed the door. Adrian saw Daniel leave and kindly said to Teresa, "All right, let me handle the rest. You go rest and wash yourself up." At this moment, Teresa noticed that her wet white pastor's robe was tightly against her body, outlining curves, and the skin beneath the robe was faintly visible. Teresa's face turned slightly red as she prepared to open the door and leave the office. As soon as she opened the door, she saw a few pairs of small eyes staring at the door in the hallway. A majestic voice came from Teresa's mouth. "Everyone, go do your homework." Amidst the laughter of a group of novice pastors fleeing, Teresa left the office and slammed the door shut. Adrian sighed. The young pastors who come here to intern are not as good as each generation. They don't even know that they can't run in the hallway. If they become regular in the future, they don't know if other monasteries will accept them. The rainstorm lasted for 3 days. The pale sunlight struggled to penetrate the gray clouds and sprinkled on the ground covered in thick dust, telling Li Longhui that it was daytime now. After the rain stopped, the accumulated ponds on the ground quickly seeped into the soil or evaporated into the air. The dust on the ground also dried out quickly, and the ashes floated up again and mixed with the water vapor in the air, forming a gray mist that covered the entire explosion area, and the visibility was even lower than before the rain. Li Longhui sat on the skull of the wreckage of the giant beast, posing as a thinker, with only a jade foot suspended in the air, swaying irregularly, and his left hand occasionally rubbing and playing with his drooping brown black waist-length hair. Looking at the scenery with a visual range of less than 20 meters in front of me, I once thought I was colorblind, until I shyly examined my body carefully. Under the snow-white skin, the delicate blue capillaries and those pink organs found other colors in the world of black, white, and gray. Li Longhui discovered that the wreckage of this giant beast was very large, because next to the largest pile of bones, he silently counted the number and walked around for about half an hour. The remains of the giant beast are scattered throughout this wilderness. If it weren't for someone intentionally moving so far, it could have been blown apart, not only scattered but also flying far away. As for why it is a giant beast, because there is only one huge skull sitting underneath with its bare buttocks. The most incomprehensible thing is that the place where I was initially imprisoned, upon digging it out, was nothing but an oval-shaped egg. Looking at my slender fingers, I felt like biting off the dusty crevices between my nails as I scraped off my eggs, but I felt nauseous again. Remembering the feeling of small particles mixed in the soft dust while digging, it was clearly bone ash and debris. Thinking of the few mouthfuls of sewage that had been filled before, I don't know how much it had been mixed in. Sigh. With a sigh. Chapter 3. Moving forward. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sunlight slowly slants westward, indicating that night is coming. Li Longhui continued to sit on the skull of the giant beast in a daze. Oh, not really. It's thinking. Who am I? Where is this? Where am I going? Sleeping in a hibernation chamber for 1,000 years. Crossing seas and give up. Rebirth. Or was he kidnapped by the Iron Blood Star people? Reincarnation, defeat demons and eliminate demons. Buddha, I don't want to obtain scriptures. Nowadays, Li Longhui no longer struggles to become a woman because he feels that he is not even human. From the skeleton of the giant beast, it seems like a dinosaur, but the dinosaur is not that big. Is it that kind of real dragon? And she came out of an egg, so it was it that gave birth to me. How did that well-maintained childcare center turn into an apocalyptic ghost place? Apart from the sound it makes and the flow of air, there is no other sound. Are you the last survivor? Don't let any fungal monsters suddenly emerge. Palm pressed and touched the left chest, without feeling any heartbeat. Instead, I feel that there is a crystal-like object in the middle of my chest, which is the most important organ of the body and a source of energy. Is it Jin Dan? Isn't that thing supposed to be in Dantian? Feeling a constant stream of energy, I effortlessly kneaded the remains of a giant beast into powder. Whether it was the bones that had been left for a long time, the bones that became loose, or my unparalleled strength. It's been 4 days now, except for taking a few sips of rainwater, my stomach is not hungry at all, and I even feel like I don't need to breathe. Through repeated experiments of inhaling with closed breath, blue and purple flames are spewing out from my throat. Is my mother with this body really a dragon? The sun has completely set below the horizon, and the world has become pitch black without any starlight or moonlight. But his own eyes slowly saw everything around him clearly, even farther than during the day. I am not surprised at all by my magical eyes now. At first, in the rain, I felt the water droplets dazzle my eyes, and I felt a transparent layer of eye cover roll over, covering my eyes and allowing me to see directly in the water. More and more like reptiles, this young girl's appearance is like a layer of outer skin, wrapped around the inner dragon, as if she could have 2 horns at any time, sharp teeth in her mouth, sharp claws in her hands, wings on her back, and a dragon tail in her spine and tailbone. Is it necessary for such a powerful creature, even a newborn beast, to disguise itself like a chameleon with a girl-like mimicry? Li Longhui didn't think much anymore, straightened up, jumped off the ground from the giant beast's skull, rubbed his toes against the soft dust mixed with ashes and debris, and slowly walked towards the direction of the sun setting, deciding to leave this cemetery. On the other side, Adrian and his student Daniel, escorted by the Guardian Knights led by Captain L'Oreal, are on their way to Santo Castle. After 3 days of rainstorm, the dirt road became muddy, which seriously slowed down the cycling speed. The location of Xianting Fortress is the pass of Xianting Canyon where the original expedition army retreated. The king, in recognition of Grand Knight Goen's bravery in times of crisis, saved countless comrades, repelled the attack of the ghostly, and provided cover for the retreat of the army behind him. He conferred the title of Baron on Grand Knight Goen, and allocated the land between the east of the Xianting Canyon Pass and the west side of the Blue Wing Mountains forest to Goen as his territory. In fact, it is to make Gao Wen stare at the forest of the Blue Wing Mountains and guard the east gate of the Azon Kingdom. Gao Wen took over his wife and children from Wangdu, and after 40 years of continuous management and construction, the military camp in Aiku was expanded into a military fortress, named Xiantengbao. In recent years, with the continuous relocation of military families, the development of commerce, and the activities of adventurers and mercenaries, there has been a trend towards urban development. However, Gao Wen himself died young due to continuous injuries and the accumulation of curse power in battles. Adrian personally held a funeral for this life-saving benefactor. The current Baron of Xiantengbao is Hawk, the son of Gao Wen. What Adrian didn't know at this time was that Baron Hawk was leading an elite knightly order of 300 people to support the village of Ginkgo. The cause of the incident was that on the third day of the rainstorm, 3 embarrassed adventurers came to Xianting Castle to help each other. They reported that Baigua village was besieged by a large group of goblins, including Goblin Shaman, who commanded warcraft. Under the cover of the garrison and militia of Baigua village, they broke through the siege. At that time, Teresa and her group were attacked by Goblin, who sent out reconnaissance troops. Baron Hawk found the president of the Xiantengbao branch of the Adventurer Guild, confirmed the identities of the 3 adventurers, and immediately dispatched the vanguard cavalry. After the rain stopped, I personally led an elite knightly order of 300 people to march and have the Adventurer Guild issue a mission to gather adventurers as reinforcements to support Baigua village. But now, Baron Hook is facing the same troubles as Adrian. A cavalry team dressed in standard plate armor, with long spears raised high, long swords tied around the waist, and a silver iron fist square flag with a yellow border and white background, slowly moved along the muddy road to Baigua village. Occasionally, rolling stones and overturned trees blocked the road, and the rapid mobility support of cavalry operations turned into engineering clearing obstacles. Just as Baron Hawk's team was struggling to move forward, a vanguard carrying a stranger approached the team head-on. The 3 knights immediately drew their swords and rushed out of the team to intercept. The sentinels slowed down their horses and shouted that it was their own. The stranger behind them also jumped lightly and landed on the ground. Baron Hawk, surrounded by the guards, spoke on horseback. The stranger was a woman wearing dark green leather armor, with an iron forehead guard on her head, a long bow and arrow bag on her back, and a belt of equipment around her waist. Each pocket was bulging, indicating that there were many props inside, and a dagger was tied to her calf. The woman has short reddish-brown hair, with a green feather inserted on the left. She has a face from the Northern Kingdom, which looks very delicate, but her pointed ears prove that she is a mixed-race elf. The woman placed her right fist on her left chest, clenched her fist, and spoke, "I am Lim from the Chitsi regiment. I will report the situation of the Battle of Baigua village to the Baron." See Baron Hawk nodding. Lim continued, "Goblin took advantage of the thunderstorm to cover up his tracks and infiltrated the vicinity of the village. He has been besieging the village for 3 days now, and the village has suffered heavy losses. Last night, Goblin launched a sudden attack and attacked the village. Later, the defense team organized a counterattack and drove out all of Goblin, but women and children were abducted. Now, a large number of goblins are still wandering around the village, and the small team Goblin has returned to the forest with prisoners and loot. They should have returned to their nest first. The village's current strength is only enough to defend and cannot organize rescue. My sister followed up alone, she will leave a mark, and I can track them. Baron Hawk frowned and pondered. At the current marching speed, he could only reach the village of Baigua tomorrow at the earliest. After sweeping away the enemy on the outskirts of the village, over time, he would inevitably lose the trace of the goblin team, and women and children would not be able to be rescued. Baron Hawk asked, I heard that goblin has warcraft, which one is it? It's a mutated giant wolf, twice the size of an ordinary adult wolf and more bloodthirsty. After answering, Lim continued, mutation is not the corruption of evil gods, it should only be influenced by the curse of the forest in the Blue Urn Mountains. Baron Hawk ultimately made a decision to divide his troops and lead his own large army to the village of Ginkgo to clear the siege, sending a small team to the forest for rescue. Percy, I now order you to take 30 knights with you to follow Lim from the Red Knights to rescue the villagers, Baron Hook ordered to a young knight beside him. Obey me. When the young knight was about to leave, Baron Hawk tightened his reins and whispered, Percy, my son, this is your first time leading a team alone. As a knight, you must bravely kill the enemy, and as the heir of the Baron, you must judge the situation. So, 2 teams, one big and one small, marched in 2 different directions. Chapter 4. Chatting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Adrian and his group, whose horse legs were covered in mud and clothes were stained with mud, finally arrived at the Xianting Castle. A commercial street has formed outside the gate of the Xiantengbeo fortress. Taverns, hotels, blacksmiths, weapons stores, pharmacies, bakeries, freight stations. There are also many street vendors setting up street stalls to buy and sell goods. Busy and bustling, thriving. Adrian saw many adventurers gathering fully armed in front of the Adventurers Guild door. The guild's counter lady was running in and out, holding documents to ask for signatures from various leaders and giving them a large package of potions. But Adrian didn't pay much attention. After presenting the golden sun emblem of the Holy Church, the guards at the fortress gate made a brief inquiry and successfully entered the outer ring of the fortress. Adrian pointed to Daniel at the tower where the office of the Magic Tower in Santenberg was located in the northwest corner, and instructed him to first take the monitoring magic item brought back by Teresa and go find a wizard to inspect it. Subsequently, Captain L'Oreal was instructed to lead the cavaliers of the Guardian Army, who took care of the horses and were allowed to move freely. I walked up to the gate of the inner castle and greeted the knight guarding the gate, then entered the inner castle by brushing my face. The inner fortress is the last line of defense of Santo Castle and also the residence of Baron Hook's family. A butler-like person greeted him and said, Respected Master Adrian, what can I do for you, leading Adrian towards the reception room. Adrian said he wants to meet Baron Hook. The butler apologized, the Baron is not currently in the fortress, and briefly explained the situation in Baigua village. Adrian was taken aback. The butler continued, Lord Severus, the special envoy of the Magic Tower, and Lord Hine, the elf ambassador, are currently in the reception room. Oh, is Bullock, the president of the Adventurer Guild Sintenberg branch, there? Adrian asked. The butler replied, Mr. Block, the president, is not here. He took the Baron's commission and personally led a team to support the village of Ginkgo. Adrian suddenly realized, I see. As soon as I approached the reception hall, I heard 2 male voices coming from inside the door. The butler opened the door of the reception hall and Adrian walked in. When Adrian entered, 2 men stood and sat in the living room. One of them was wearing a light green gold-trimmed V-neck dress, revealing a white silk undershirt. He had smooth light gold long hair that was shoulder-length, pointed ears, and a handsome appearance. He warmly spread his arms and walked over, ready to embrace Adrian. This was the elf ambassador Hine. Another middle-aged man sat still on the sofa, dressed in an all-black wizard robe and silver-rimmed glasses. The gloomy man with black hair split in the middle was Severus, the special envoy of the Magic Tower. Adrian politely hugged Hine, and his chest was hit by a hard object. Roast in his heart. Oh, the older he is, the better he is. He still wears soft armor under his dress. Don't be fooled by Hein's youthful appearance, he is a complete old monster. His story was passed down 400 years ago, and no one knows how old he is now. He is different from other high elves who like to crawl in the hidden forest. He has been to the underground city of dwarves to compete for wine, and has been to the western archipelago and sea monsters overseas to explore vocal music. He has almost traveled to all the human countries on the continent, but what he has not been to is because he has lost his country. It is precisely because of this kind of love for the outside world that the Elf Council chose Hein as its ambassador, residing in the human nation. What were you two talking about just now? Adrian rambled. Ha ha ha, I recruited a very promising young man in the kingdom of Codwin last month, Hein said with a smile. Oh, it's the mixed-race elf girl who applied for the magic tower in Codwin and won first place in the tower entrance test, Adrian continued. Right, Hein affirmed. Severus's gloomy face became even more gloomy. In front of a group of high-ranking officials, he abducted a good seedling, which was a safe slap in the face. Severus retorted, she's not even a mixed-race elf, she doesn't even have sharp ears. Hein said seriously, Severus, you are too shallow. How can you judge a person only by their appearance, whether they are elves, and whether they have the blood of elves? Even if they have only a little thin blood, they can resonate with elf magic. I will not give up on any mixed-race elves. Mixed-race elves are also elves, and they have the right to learn elf magic. Adrian naturally knew that Hein's theory was nonsense. It was okay for him to go to the human family, and no one was sure if his ancestors had been greened by the elves. However, when faced with the recruitment of elves with deep accumulation, the parties involved received benefits, and outsiders could say nothing more. But he even used this kind of rhetoric to tell a dwarf that you are a mixed-race elf, and the dwarves naturally didn't eat it. A group of dwarves drove Hein away with hammers. But Hein was not easy either. The higher elves had the weakest resistance to the curse of the two-headed magic dragons. In order to search for the hero of the elf race, Fafu of the Fast Wind, and the artifact Elder Hunting Bow, he had to shamelessly deceive and pull up a mixed-race elf army to operate in the forest of the Blue Ern Mountains, which gave rise to the current Red Army. But on the other hand, stepping on the magic tower is politically correct, and of course we should step on it together. Severus was very angry. That girl didn't want to learn elf magic, so she was enchanted by the old elf with a fox-like face. At that time, her eyes were even drawn. Isn't the beard of the great mages not handsome? Adrian brought the topic back to the right track and said, although Baron Hook and President Block are not here now, they are also here because of the monitoring data of the power of the curse. Hein shrugged his hand and said, it's lowered a lot. Severus also agreed, it's the same. Adrian said, the area I am responsible for has also decreased, and I think the Adventurer Guild is also responsible for the same area. Severus said, once all the data is compiled, I will send it to the Magic Tower for big data analysis. Hein said, so what are the plans next, such as entering the explosion zone for internal monitoring? Adrian asked, how is the development of your super monitoring doll, Severus? Severus replied, it's called S.Level Protection. Anti-double-headed magic dragon special curse. All-terrain inspection and combat integration. Automatic magic doll, but it's just a little short. Hein gestured with 2 fingers and mocked, how much is a little bit? Last time, your alchemist, who was hailed as a genius and beautiful girl mage, swallowed a large amount of research and development funds. In the end, he took an old antique excavated from the ruins of dwarf Jincha, repainted it, and used it as the latest product. That little bit of funding is enough to arm a guard knights. Severus blushed and said, she's not a wizard anymore. She was expelled from the magic tower and forever locked up in the Iron Maiden. Adrian sighed inwardly, which is why stepping on the magic tower is politically correct, because whether it is the 4 great northern kingdoms or the southern empire, the huge amount of money flowing into the magic tower every year does not make a sound. Hein concluded, that's why mixed-race elves cannot be trained by magic towers and will be corrupted. Adrian is very awkward. If Hawk were there, everyone would give him face based on Gao Wen's affection, so there would be no need for such a sharp confrontation in the conversation. Adrian shifts the topic. What do you think about the situation in Baigua village? Hawk has gone to provide support, there is quite a stir. Hein said, I can't find any waves. There's a Red Boy squad near Baigua village. Severus also said, as we all know, the magic tower does not interfere with the affairs of local nobles. Adrian said, do you think it's related to the weakening of the curse? High-intensity curse power can instantly kill all living creatures, while low-intensity curse power can induce monster mutations. Severus said, previous evidence suggests that the power of curses does indeed induce monster mutations, but they are all sporadic individuals. Compared to the recent massive attack on the village by Goblin, there is currently not enough evidence to support this hypothesis, and more data needs to be collected afterwards. Adrian, Hein listens to your words more than words. Hein asked Adrian, the monastery is quite close to Ginkgo village. Don't you worry about sitting there. Adrian replied, it's okay, with Teresa around, her strength has become stronger again and she will soon surpass me. Hein said, oh, Delisa's daughter, perhaps she is also a descendant of wandering elves. Adrian rolled his eyes. Chapter 5. Walking Alone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 6. Hunting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the reception room of Xiantengbao, the conversation between the three big shots was once again awkward. Fortunately, at this moment, there will be laughter as pleasant as a silver bell coming from outside the cabin. A young girl walked in after the maid pushed open the door. The girl wore a soft brown hair, a pearl necklace, a blue jumpsuit, a low-cut waist, and a bubble short-sleeved long skirt. The girl was bright and charming, and sweetly shouted at Adrian, Grandpa Adrian. Then came a wave of magical power. Severus remained expressionless, Hein frowned, and Adrian smiled like a chrysanthemum and welcomed him. The girl plunged into Adrian's arms and hugged him, with seductive eyes. She looked up and said, Grandpa Adrian, Lillian, I miss you so much. Why don't you come to my house and play games first? Adrian stroked Lillian's little head and answered, not bad. Lillian's enchantment magic is better controlled, no longer shooting randomly like before. It can focus on one person now. If my strength is one level lower, maybe I will be successfully enchanted by you. Hein also sensed the charm and magic, after all, he was familiar with this old man. When he went to seduce, oh no, it was to summon some good seedlings, he would also apply some magic to enhance his charm and increase his persuasiveness. The girl's name is Lillian, and she is the youngest daughter of Baron Hawk. She is 15 years old and has a talent for charm, but it is also a hidden danger. Charm is the power to abuse evil gods. As Lillian grows older, her magic will become increasingly powerful, and the power of seduction will also exponentially increase, which will attract the attention of the evil gods who want to abuse them. If she cannot control every trace of her growing seductive magic, it will become a bait for the evil gods who want to abuse them, and ultimately be corrupted. Unless sealed with magic and kept as an ordinary person for a lifetime, one day one will face evil gods directly. Lillian pouted cutely, withdrew from her embrace, legs slightly bent, lifted the hem of her skirt, made a ladylike gesture, and then said, It's getting late for the 3 adults. Should we move to the restaurant? Severus refused directly and said to return to the office. Hein glanced at Severus's paralyzed face and thought to himself that he was really an uninteresting guy, so he directly refused the invitation of the beautiful girl. No wonder the magic tower was dug into by himself. Hein glanced again at Adrian and Lillian, who looked like grandparents and grandchildren, and politely declined, saying that he would return to the House of the Red Guards. When the Baron returned, please send someone to notify him. Sent away the guest. Lillian held Adrian's hand and walked towards the restaurant, saying, Grandpa and Daniel's guest rooms are ready. The Knights of the Guardian Army should stay overnight in the military dormitory on the outer ring of the fortress. Can Grandpa tell me about the monastery after dinner? There is a meme in this world called intergenerational kinship. Most of the old comrades in the expedition army received the favor of Gao Wen. After Gao Wen's death, everyone vigorously whipped Hawk, hoping that he would be as strong and excellent as his father. However, everyone only remembered Gao Wen's glorious image and selectively forgot some details. Hawk doubted whether he had picked it up and when he had such a perfect father. When Hawk gave birth to Percy and Lillian, especially Lillian, the old folks treated her as a treasure. Like dedicating his whole life to the Holy Church, with only Teresa in his heart, Adrian, who has no children of his own, is naturally obedient to Lillian and will not refuse her demands. The forest also entered darkness. A agile figure shuttles between the big trees, leaving only a trace. Stereoscopic maneuver. Li Longhui, who has night vision, is completely unaffected in the dark. He can always find a good landing point and a starting point, and even step on a flying bat to borrow strength. As for the air double jump, it is currently not possible to do so. But now Li Longhui has encountered a new problem. Since leaving the gray and foggy area, he has gradually felt hungry, thirsty, and tired. It turns out that he is not a perpetual motion machine after all, and can solve all problems just by drinking the northwest wind. He gnawed on the leaves, collected several fruits, and pulled out bird eggs, but after eating them, he didn't feel any satisfaction. He sniffed the smell in the air and headed towards the place where there might be water, hoping to find the water source first and then see how to proceed next. Li Longhui deftly fell from the treetops onto a flat ground covered in fallen leaves, with a small pond in front of him. The pond seemed to be stagnant water, the water was turbid, and I was thinking about whether I could drink it, so I became alert. There are no insects or birds chirping here, it's quiet and terrifying, with a hint of smell that hasn't been heard before. Just as Li Longhui wanted to take action, he left this place. Suddenly, a row of sharp spikes rose from the ground, surrounding Li Longhui in the middle. A huge insect head slowly rose from the fallen leaves, a pair of tentacles flipped up and down like steel whips, a pair of jaw limbs were cold, and a row of serrated teeth in the open mouthpiece made a creaking sound, dripping foul-smelling saliva. A mouthful of mucus sprayed out and flew towards Li Longhui. Li Longhui dodged on his side, and the mucus landed on the ground with a growling sound. The big bug missed one move and the second one came one after another. The spikes surrounding Li Longhui quickly contracted, wrapping around his body. The real body of the big bug was fully revealed, and it was a giant centipede. The spikes on the ground were actually its feet. Now its articulated body slowly tightens, squeezing its prey. Its head is aimed at the prey's head and it bites it down. Li Longhui grabbed the jaw limbs of the giant centipede with both hands, making it unable to move a single inch. Suddenly, he exerted force and directly pulled off the pair of jaw limbs. The giant centipede suffered from pain and let go of Li Longhui's body, causing it to roll on the ground. For a moment, debris flew around and trees broke. Li Longhui is still in danger, surrounded by the twisted limbs of the giant centipede. Suddenly, the tail of the giant centipede swung, and a cold and shining tail spike pierced Li Longhui's chest. Everything was between lightning and fire. Li Longhui blocked the tail spike with his left hand, pressed down on the spike with his right hand, and lifted the left knee cap with a click. The tail spike broke, and with a flick of his hand, the broken tail spike flew straight to the third stage of the giant centipede. The shell of the giant centipede shattered and was directly nailed to the ground by the tail. Taking advantage of your illness and killing you, Li Longhui jumped high and kicked it in the middle section, breaking the shell. Then, he stabbed his hands into the wound and pulled hard, tearing the giant centipede into two pieces. The lower part twisted a few times before it stopped moving. The upper part struggled even harder. Li Longhui quickly moved in a zigzag line to avoid the sharp feet on the twisting body of the giant centipede. He leaped to the top of the giant centipede, and the small fist fell like a rainstorm. In a moment, the carapace was broken, the insect fluid was splashed, and a piece of crystal was brought out. The giant centipede completely stopped moving. Li Longhui flipped down from the head of the giant centipede, picked up the crystal, and thought about whether the crystal he felt in his chest was the same thing, so he put away the crystal first. Watching this giant centipede as the result of my first hunting, I instantly felt a sense of accomplishment, but hunger surged up again. Recalling the 10 cooking methods taught by survival masters, Li Longhui pondered and decided to eat them raw in the simplest way possible. Breaking one foot, pulling out the meat, imagining it to be the leg of an emperor crab, he bit it down and chewed it. Poo, poo, poo. It's crunchy without chicken flavor, only with a bitter taste, and the tongue is a bit numb. It's really a waste of this pile of meat. Li Longhui dug out the crystal again, picked up a leaf and wiped off the mucus on it, looking left and right. I'm not even human anymore. I've beaten even the centipede, but trying it won't kill me. Suddenly, I stuffed the egg-sized crystal into my mouth, and with a click, I bit the crystal into powder and swallowed it. After a while, I felt a surge of energy flowing into the crystals in my chest, which became more abundant. Then, a warm current returned to my body, and I stretched comfortably, finally finding my correct recipe. Walking to the corpse of the giant centipede, I pulled out the tail spike that pierced through the shell and was nailed to the ground stone. I raised the tail spike high, and with a flash of spiritual light, I now name you the victory oath thorn. Fight with me. Upon closer examination of this thorn, it is approximately 3 fingers thick and thin, with a long and short arm. The entire body is blue and gray, and it is hollow. It should be used for injecting venom, but now it can be used for bleeding. Holding the thorn in his arms, he sat down in a corner, had a full meal, and obtained weapons. Let's take a break for a while. Chapter 7. Encounters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sunlight sprinkled on the pond, shimmering and reflecting water that captivated her eyes. A young girl lay stretched out on the golden fallen leaves. The morning dew had already wet half of her hair, leaving only a rough robe covering her body, unable to block the beautiful spring light. The rustling sound in the distance finally startled the young girl. Her thin eyelids slowly lifted, and the pupils in her hazy eyes suddenly contracted. Li Longhui jumped up suddenly, picked up the thorn of the victory oath, and put on an attacking posture. On the corpse of the giant centipede, several different types of insects climbed up, some gnawing on flesh and blood, some laying eggs, some dividing the body and transporting it to other places. Judging from this posture, the giant centipede would disappear in no time. How could I be so relaxed? Isn't this body supposed to not need sleep? Why did I fall asleep yesterday? What if these insects crawl onto me at night? Filled with emotions of regret, anger, and fear, a wave of evil energy emanated, and the insects froze and froze. Swish, swish, swish. The sting of the oath of victory struck 11 times in lightning speed, killing 11 insects of all kinds and darting at the tip of the spike, while the other insects scattered and fled. Looking at the insect skewers, I thought about how to eat them. Of course, it's not about eating insect meat, but whether there are crystals inside the insects. I took each insect off the tip of the thorn and carefully dissected them. After a busy period of work, it turned out that these low-level insects were not worthy of crystals. Kicking away these insect corpses with 1 foot, all 10 of my fingers were covered in the juice from dissecting insects. It looked crystal clear, as if frozen. Then, I glanced at the white and tender insect eggs on the giant centipede corpse. If I dripped the juice onto the insect eggs, I shook my head and removed this recipe from my mind. Let's wash up first and take a closer look at the pond. The bottom of the pond is filled with bones, and the ecological chain is rich in the turbid water. Quietly picking up the leaves, wiping his hands, and then picking up a branch, he curled his clumped waist-length hair into a ball and inserted it into the back of his head. Hurry up and leave this rundown place. We need to find a clean water source to clean our bodies. Squeeze your nose, capture odor molecules in the air, eliminate the smell of stagnant pools in your mind, smell the scent of other water sources, jump onto tree tops and fly away. Lim from the Chitsi regiment, along with the knights led by Percy, finally found her sister Sherm. The knights, who excel in frontal combat, encounter many troubles after entering the forest. Due to the complex terrain and dense tree branches, everyone had to dismount and walk. Due to the rapid depletion of energy and fresh water carried, they had to take off their full armor to save energy and let the horses carry them. The unprotected knights were also injured due to various minor incidents. Later, Lim took a detour to find a water source to replenish fresh water, and went hunting at night to replenish military supplies. It was only then that the knights finally persevered to this point. When they saw Lim's sister Shem, everyone was surprised to find out that they were twins. Shem inserted a blue feather on the right side of her head, while Lim inserted a green feather on the left side of her head to distinguish it. Shem reported that Goblin had a total of over 40 female villagers captured, including 9 adults and 3 children. There is a small stream ahead, it's best for us to rescue the villagers before they cross the river. The sisters can cross the river first and shoot arrows on the opposite bank to suppress Goblin, while the knights surround the enemy. When appropriate, they can make a gap for Goblin to escape, mainly to rescue villagers. Keep all the horses to avoid exposing their whereabouts in advance. Once the battle plan was established, we began to take action. The knights began to wear plate armor again, and considering waiting battles, half of them only chose to wear breastplates to increase their agility. 2 more people were left to guard the horses, while the others fanned around behind Goblin's team. The sisters, Shem and Lim, relied on their vigorous skills to cross the stream at the downwind and arrived at the opposite bank ahead of time. They climbed a tree and ambushed each other, about 20 meters apart. They monitored the Goblin team slowly approaching the stream. The stream is only deep in the calves, which has no significant impact on the human race. It is a natural obstacle to the short Goblin, and as long as the knights come over, it can form a siege, catching Goblin off guard. At this moment, my advantage lies in me. Li Longhui jumped off the tree, rolled and hid in the bushes. The smell of the water source is right ahead, but after learning from the experience of the giant centipede incident, Li Longhui began to become cautious. There are 2 new smells appearing nearby, which should be from animals, and he is not sure if there is any danger. In the bushes, Li Longhui slowly crawled closer with his cat on his waist, and through the cracks in the bushes, he saw a group of ugly green little people. Sham was a bit anxious. Several goblins had already crossed the creek, and the rear team was driving the villagers to the water. Why hasn't the knights come yet? The best opportunity has been missed, and he and his sister alone cannot suppress so many goblins, and he is afraid that goblins will jump over the wall and kill the villagers. Sham looked at the tree where Lim was hiding, wanting to give a glance and communicate. But I found that the shrub under the tree was shaking, getting closer and closer to Lim, but Lim didn't notice it. Unfortunately, it was an enemy surprise attack. Sham immediately arched his bow and fired a sharp arrow, reaching a distance of 20 meters in an instant. Bang! Watch out, Goblin. Successful stealth, launch a surprise attack, use a stuffy stick to strike weaknesses, deal critical hits, and deal 0 damage to Li Longhui. Li Longhui. With a bewildered expression on his face. Li Longhui's back of the head was suddenly hit, and he turned his head to see what was going on. At this moment, a green-skinned little monster was falling upside down due to the reaction force of the just hit. Watchman Goblin got up and rushed over with a wooden stick when he saw that his prey was fine. Li Longhui saw the green-skinned monster charging towards his buttocks. Oh, it's so ugly, don't come over. Kicked backwards. Li Longhui. With an ordinary kick, deal a fatal blow to the sentinel goblin. Watching goblin. Death. That's it. Li Longhui turned around and continued to climb over with his cat waist. He rubbed the body of the green-skinned monster with the thorn of the victory oath and carefully examined it. Oh, is this goblin, so this world is a world of swords and magic. Li Longhui stabbed his nails into goblin's chest, made a cut, reached in and dug out a pile of internal organs, as well as a crystal the size of a pigeon egg. Sure enough, goblin is a demon with crystals. He wiped his bloody hands and crystal stone with the hem of his tattered robe, then took a bite of the crystal stone and bit it into pieces before swallowing it. I feel like I've absorbed some energy, but there isn't as much as giant centipedes, but isn't there still a lot there? Hee hee. Li Longhui crawled back and looked through the gaps in the bushes again. There is a cave entrance there, and at this moment, a group of goblins are playing with dogs outside. No, they are abusing wolves. A goblin was holding a young wolf in one hand and a knife in the other, laughing loudly at 5 adult wolves who were only 1.5 meters tall. A group of goblins dancing around were watching the play, and 2 smaller young wolves were trapped in a small animal cage and threatened by goblin with sticks. The young wolves let out a whimpering plea for mercy, while the 5 adult wolves bared their teeth and continued to pounce, but dared not approach and attack. It seems like he's training wolves and knows how to threaten his cubs, Li Longhui thought. At this moment, a horn sounded from a distance, and goblin began to panic. Some goblins started driving adult wolves into large animal cages with spears, some began to wear their tattered armor, some go back to the cave, some come out of the cave, and they happen to bump into each other, some have already run towards the direction of blowing the horn. Is this an opportunity? Li Longhui shook his hand and the thorn of the victory oath flew straight, pinching the goblin face of the young wolf. Oh no, I missed the shot. The thorn of the victory oath flew lower and hit goblin's stomach. The young wolf let go and fell to the ground, while goblin fell to the ground, howling and wailing. An adult wolf noticed the incident and immediately dodged the spear that drove it away. It flew and protected the young wolf, sniffing the scent of the promise of victory sting. With one foot, it stepped on the head of the fallen goblin and exerted force, clicking, and goblin stopped barking. Adult wolves howled up to the sky. Without the coercion of the young wolves, the other 4 adult wolves also launched a fierce attack and instantly formed a ball with goblin. Although goblin had an advantage in number, his previous panic caused him to not be able to organize himself now, and his individual strength could not fight against the taller and stronger wolves. It was really a group of children. Li Longhui, on the other hand, did a good job at home. He walked around to the small animal cage, pinched it with his hand, and the rusty lock shattered. He held the skin around his neck, a little wolf cub in one hand, and masturbated the wolf in his arms. One of the cubs wanted to resist, so he turned his head and took a bite on his wrist, but his baby teeth were knocked off. Li Longhui's backhand brained him and he became honest. The battle didn't last long, although there were still many goblins left. Seeing that the melee had no advantage, they scattered and ran away. Now, although each of the 5 adult wolves has injuries, they immediately form an encirclement and stare at the young wolves in Li Longhui's arms. Li Longhui took a few steps forward, put down the young wolf and returned to the original position. An adult wolf approached and sniffed the young wolf, then lowered its head and approached, sniffing Li Longhui a few times. Looking at the wolf as tall as himself, he sniffed a few times but was still unsatisfied. He even grabbed his wet nose and pinched it directly at his nose. The adult wolf let out a whimper, took a step in shock, then glanced at Li Longhui, let out a howl, turned around, grabbed the young wolf, and ran away with the other wolves. Oh, there's no such thing as acknowledging the master. Li Longhui picked up the thorn of the victory oath and looked at the bodies of more than 10 goblins on the ground, as if he also wanted to thank these working wolves. I think even the goblin crystal I have won't fly, why not go into the cave and see what treasures there are. Chapter 8. Combat. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The arrow shot by Shem arrived in an instant, and a goblin fell to the ground with a whimper. But more goblins jumped out of the bushes. Shem underestimated the enemy and didn't expect Goblin to have a receiving force across the creek. Lim also realized something was wrong, took out a chili smoke bomb from her equipment bag, and smashed it at Goblin under the tree, while she immediately transferred it. Shem shot another arrow and shifted his position towards Lim. At this moment, a goblin sounded its horn, and Shem was startled, wondering if it was calling for reinforcements. The knights may have spent too much time re-equipping themselves. Perhaps Percy was too cautious in leading his troops independently for the first time, afraid of being detected by Goblin in advance, so the team did not follow too closely, or perhaps it's just that Goblin's team has accelerated their pace. When Percy's troops arrived at the creek, a portion of the female villagers had already been driven to the other side of the stream, and more goblins were rushing towards the other side. Percy shouted loudly, "Riders charge!" and then raised her shield to charge towards Goblin, who had not yet crossed the stream. When a female villager saw someone coming to save her, she immediately refused to obey Goblin's drive. A female villager who was wading in the water immediately became angry and pushed Goblin, who was guarding her, into the water. The depth of the stream was already up to Goblin's waist, and when she was pushed down, she struggled desperately. Goblin, who is still on this shore, has 10 spears raised in front to form a spear formation, and 4 have picked up short bows or crossbows to shoot arrows at Posy. Percy's charging spirit bounced away the arrows, and the shield broke the spear. The shield hit and overturned the 2 goblin spearmen in front of her, and a sword struck the shield of the goblin sword shield soldiers behind her. The knight who followed closely also broke through the spear formation and collided with other goblin sword shield soldiers. The goblin spearmen who were knocked down had not yet stood up when they were killed by the knights behind them who came up to repair their swords. Percy increased her fighting spirit and released it. The wooden shield that had been struck shattered, and a knife landed on Goblin's head, splitting his head in half. Stepping over the corpse of the goblin sword shield soldier, charging towards the back row, a flying shield smashed one short-bow goblin to death, and another sword killed the other. Goblin saw that the formation was torn apart, his compatriots were killed by chopping melons and vegetables, and he ignored the villagers who were still on the shore and captured them. He turned around and jumped into the stream to escape. Originally, Goblin, who was urging the female villagers in the stream, saw that the defense line on the shore was being breached so quickly. He was afraid that he would be the next one, so he all fled towards the opposite bank. Unfortunately, there was no goblin to help the one trapped in the water by the female villager, and in the end, it drowned. The female villagers in the stream ran towards the shore when they saw that Goblin was not in charge of them. The knights cut open the rope that tied the hands of the female villager, and the villager picked up the weapon that killed Goblin and began to defend herself. Percy saw that the battle on this side of the shore was basically settled. Looking across, there were 2 female villagers and 3 children. Percy picked up the shield and led his team to kill the other side. Goblin, who was on the other side, thought he had a large number and went into the water to kill him. However, he did not expect the defensive line to collapse so quickly. Now he is neither retreating nor advancing, but there is no time to think about it. With a knight's sword, he slashed at him. It turns out that there is no advantage in water, and some people don't emphasize martial arts and shoot cold arrows in the back. The goblin array in the stream quickly became unstoppable, turned around and ran away, revealing its back and being knocked down with a sword. Those who were fighting and retreating were surrounded by several knights and killed by indiscriminate swords. Goblin, who blew the horn, looked at the unfavorable situation of the battle and wondered why reinforcements were not yet available. From the direction of the nest in the distance, a goblin running towards here doesn't seem to be coming for reinforcements, but is actually running away. How about a strategic retreat first? He called on the 3 goblins and ignored the female villagers, carrying the 3 children back to the nest. Sham noticed the movement here, but it was beyond the range of his bow and arrow. He gave Lim a glance and tracked him down. Lim said she received it and quickly drew her bow to end the battle by the stream. The battle finally came to an end, and the knights suffered 16 minor injuries, one of whom was seriously injured. Due to not wearing full armor, their arms were cut off and no one died. At the cost of this, they smashed Goblin and rescued 2 female villagers on the other side. The knights drank healing potions, treated the wounds simply, and distributed physical potions to the female villagers, as they had to rush back. Lim reported to Percy about the whereabouts of her sister Shem and 3 children, as well as the horn-blowing goblin and possibly goblin reinforcements. Goblin's reinforcements made Percy's heart skip a beat. Although the battle ended in victory, there were many unexpected incidents. Is this what my father said about assessing the situation for the sake of 3 unfamiliar children? No, the knight's heart does not allow him to retreat. Percy immediately ordered to leave 10 injured knights here to protect the female villagers, while the others continued to advance and rescue 3 children. Sham had been worried about the possibility of goblin reinforcements and was very careful along the way, but when he followed Goblin to his destination, he felt relieved and picked up the missing item. Horn Goblin and the 3 little brothers returned to the nest, and for a moment, the empty animal cage, the dozen or so corpses at the entrance of the cave, my wolf and my tribe. Horn Goblin was furious and was about to kick 3 children to vent. 4 consecutive arrows suddenly shot, and Horn Goblin was hit by an arrow in the shoulder. One of the younger brothers blocked it with a shield grid, while the other 2 brothers didn't have such good luck and just had their heads blown out. Then a charged arrow shot, shattering the shield and killing the last young man. Horn Goblin was sweating profusely. It had not yet discovered where the enemy was, but it didn't need to search anymore. With a swoosh, an arrow was nailed to its forehead. Shem appeared from the shadows of the trees and untied the ropes for 3 children. When the 3 children saw that they had finally been saved, they immediately burst into tears. Shem made a silent gesture and pointed to the cave, and the 3 children obediently shut up. From the footprints left at the scene and the wounds on Goblin's body, it appears that they were caused by the attack of a wolf-shaped demon. I don't know if there is still any danger in the cave. Let's protect these 3 children first, and then wait for the support of the knights to come. Just as he was about to get up and take the 3 children to hide in the bushes, suddenly a figure walked out of the cave. After the wolf pack left, Li Longhui entered the cave. The cave was pitch black, but who said Li Longhui could see at night? The tunnel in the cave is very long, with many forks, and some parts are very low, requiring bending over. But Li Longhui had a clear goal because in this quiet tunnel, his ears caught subtle sounds. Humph. There's also a fish in the net, let me catch you all. Walking into a small cave, Li Longhui lost his good mood. 5 women, dressed in rags and dirty, were lying there, their expressions dull and unresponsive when they saw Li Longhui. There were 2 little green skins sleeping soundly with hiccups on the side, and Li Longhui understood what was going on. It was really unbearable. Later, Li Longhui heard the commotion outside the cave and thought about whether Goblin, who had previously escaped, had returned. He suddenly felt evil towards the edge of his heart and asked me to kill you all before walking back to the cave entrance. Shem's heart broke instantly when she saw a girl walking out of the cave alone. She was dirty all over, with clumped hair tangled up on top of her head. The only piece of fabric on her body was tattered and stained with various disgusting stains. The most shocking thing was the red blood stain on the hem of the fabric. Shem instantly fantasized about hundreds of things. The girl's misfortune completely ignored the thorn in her hand, which was stained with blood. It's okay, we're here to save you. It's okay from now on. My name is Sherm, and what's your name? Comforted Shem. Li Longhui was also immersed in surprise. He had sharp ears. Was he an elf, a living elf? Could he touch it? And then I realized what she was saying. Elven language. The ancient language of the human race. Nivjad's national language. Common language in northern kingdoms. Why do I know so many languages? What's your name? Sherm asked again. My name is Li, said Li Longhui with a stubborn voice in his mouth. Wait, should I say my real name? Sham. Li, your name is Lin, right? Chapter 9. Going Home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The girl who claims to be Lin is sitting on a rock outside the entrance of Goblin's lair. At this moment, she is wearing a cloak, holding a kettle in her left hand and dry food in her right hand. She smashes it in her mouth, savoring the taste of the 2 bottles of medicine she just drank, one for healing and the other for stamina. These are all given by the kind-hearted elf sister Sherm. I took a bite of the dry food, froze my saliva, chewed it, and swallowed it. Except for some flavor, there was no energy. On the contrary, after drinking those 2 bottles of medicine, one can feel a trace of energy flowing into the crystal of the chest. If we return to human society, will we have to rely on medication to fill our stomachs in the future? The 5 women sitting or lying next to them were carried out of the nest by the knights who came later, and the 2 goblin cubs were executed on the spot. The women had haggard faces, thin limbs, but swollen breasts, unsightly wrinkles on their stomachs, and 2 women had slightly raised lower abdomen. They were also wearing cloaks now, lifeless, but there seemed to be a pathological longing in their eyes as they looked at the knight. Sham was cutting the ears of Goblin's corpse on the ground, pulling out his canine teeth, and pulling out crystals. There is a person with the same appearance nearby who is helping her. It is her sister Lim. The difference between the 2 is the blue and green feathers on their heads. Now Shem has a new feature, which is the thorn of her oath of victory, inserted into her quiver. At that time, Xuemu took the thorn and said to Li Longhui, you don't need weapons anymore. I will protect you from now on. Is this a confession? A whiff. The sound of the horse came. The new knight brought a horse. A young knight captain named Percy commanded the knight to carry the 5 women and 3 children onto the horse, while Li Longhui was pulled onto a horse by Shim and the 2 rode together. Xuemu's hands passed through Li Longhui's waist and pulled the reins. Li Longhui, on the other hand, leaned his back against her chest and turned his head. At such a close distance, he couldn't help but reach out and touch her pointed ear. Are you an elf? Asked in the fluent Northern Kingdom common language. Sham replied, I am a mixed-race elf. Where are we going? Sherm replied, go home and go to a place called the home of the Chitsi Tuan. The people there are like brothers and sisters. You will have a very happy life in the future. Lim watched as they interacted, thinking to herself. Why did my sister suddenly have a flood of maternal love? Although our age is calculated based on the age of the human race, it is indeed time to get married and have children. However, as a mixed-race elf, there is still a lot of youth, and Lord Hein will take in people without elf bloodline in the House of the Red Guards. Alas, when will we meet an excellent man like Lord Hein? Even if it's half good, it's okay. The horse moved slowly and occasionally had to bend down to avoid the low branches. Shem's body pressed even tighter, and the breath of closeness blew on his face, making the originally faint frankincense even clearer. It felt like he was trapped in Shem's embrace. The team crossed a small stream, where more than a dozen knights and farmers dressed up waited. 3 children excitedly shouted, eager to rush into the arms of their loved ones. After the team converged, they continued to move westward. The 9 newly added peasant women would occasionally glance at the 5 women and Li Longhui with pitiful and sorrowful eyes. Perhaps it was in pity for the plight of those 5 women, and also in sorrow for the fate of not being saved by the knights. As for Li Longhui, you've thought too much. At night, the knights lit a bonfire and 2 shifts guarded the center, surrounding the women in the middle. Lim called a bird and roasted it golden on the campfire. She sprinkled salt on the snow, tore off the meat, and fed it to Li Longhui's mouth. The bird's meat had a strong aroma, tender and delicious. The fine salt even enhanced the level of the grilled meat. It seems that the plan to make a fortune by refining fine salt has come to an end. Cooked food satisfies the taste buds well, but it doesn't absorb energy. Is it because it's just an ordinary bird? If it's more advanced Warcraft flesh, will it have energy? If I had known earlier, I would have tried taking a bite of goblin. After dinner, everyone lay down in their clothes, with Shem sleeping on the left and Lim sleeping on the right. Originally, there were only the chirping of insects and the crackling of bonfires around, but suddenly there came the sound of women twisting their bodies and moaning. Li Longhui originally wanted to see what was going on, but Shem's arms wrapped around him, seemingly still observing Li Longhui's expression. Seeing no change, he embraced Li Longhui and covered his ears with both hands. He whispered, "It's okay, go to sleep." In the morning, before dawn, the team was packed up and bound to leave the forest today. Lim left the brigade and set off early to send messages to the outside world. Observing the 5 women, their faces became even more haggard and they seemed to have more struggling marks on their bodies, but their gaze towards the night seemed even more pathological. The team drove out of the forest, and Lim and more soldiers were already waiting outside, bringing with them a freight cart. After transferring to the carriage's carriage, the team continued to move forward. Soon, adventurers appeared in groups of 3 or 2 on the roadside, seemingly cleaning up the battlefield. Many goblins' bodies were lying in the plains, as well as those of wolves. A village appeared on the horizon in the distance, as if it had just experienced a disaster, with several black smoke floating. Li Longhui asked Shim, who was riding a horse next to him, "Is this the home of the Red Boy troop?" Sham replied, "No, this is Baigua village. The villagers live here, so let's send them back first." At the village gate, a large group of people were waiting there. A middle-aged knight with a high status and Captain Percy hugged each other. The rescued female villagers and children also rushed out of the carriage and gathered with their loved ones in the crowd. There were also people who couldn't be found, stumbled and rushed to the ruins, crying. Sham and Lim were called away by 3 people who also had pointed ears. At this moment, there was a man wearing heavy armor, strong and short, with a big beard sitting on the nearby threshold. To his left was a hammer that was even longer than his own height, and to his right was a delicate wooden pipe. His eagle-like gaze was examining the 6 women in cloaks who had not yet descended from the carriage. When the crowd at the village dispersed, he took a puff of smoke and walked towards the middle-aged knight. "Baron Hawk, the situation in Ginkgo village is almost over. We should go back to Fairy's castle." "I heard Adrian is already waiting there," said the dwarf. Then he whispered, "Those 6 women need to be sent to the monastery in their condition. I will send a team of adventurers to escort them." Baron Hook replied, "Okay, President Block, I'll go and say hello to the members of the Red Boy Squad." The team has reorganized and set off again. Captain Percy stayed behind to be responsible for the aftermath of Ginkgo village. Xue Mu hurried over and apologized to Li Longhui, saying that he would be sent to a monastery for recuperation. She would first go back to report her injuries, and when Li Longhui recovered, she would come back to pick him up and take him to the Chitsi clan's home. After saying that, she left with her sharp-eared companion. Injury. What injury? Why didn't Li Longhui know he was injured? Alas, and the thorn of the victory oath is still with you, why did you just leave? The team walked for a while under the guidance of middle-aged knights and dwarves, and then their large army continued to advance westward, leaving behind a team of 5 adventurers who escorted the carriage and turned south. The originally cheerful team immediately quieted down, and the originally talkative 5 also remained silent. It seems that no one cares about the identity of the 6 women in this car, how long they have been abducted, and what they have experienced.